Good morning, and welcome to the Luton Literature Book Festival. My name is Imrana Mahmood. I am a creative producer. I also host the book club show on Inspire FM, and I also am the founder of Dar Amina Book Club, which is a women's book club in Luton. I'm really delighted to be here, and it's so lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for coming. So I'm going to basically dive straight in to our conversation today with Mahsuda Snaith. This is about her book, The Things We Thought We Knew. I will start with an introduction. I have some kind of already set questions for Mahsuda today that we'll discuss, some of them about her writing journey, some of them about the book itself. And if we get time, we'll we were just discussing earlier, if there's a right moment, I'll invite Mahsuda to a short reading as well. And then at the end, we'll open up the session and just to invite any questions from the audience. So Mahsuda Snaith is a writer of novels and short stories. Her debut novel, The Things We Thought We Knew, was released in 2017 when she was named an Observer New Face of Fiction. Her second novel, How to Find Home, was chosen as a BBC Radio 4 book at bedtime. She's the winner of the S.I. Leeds Literary Prize and a Bristol Short Story Prize in 2014. Mahsuda has led creative writing workshops in universities, hospitals, schools, and a homeless hostel, and has worked as a writing mentor for a variety of writing organisations. She is commissioned a writer for Colonial Countryside Project, and her short story, The Panther's Tale, is included in Hag Forgotten Folktales Retold, which is also available as a podcast from Audible. Mahsuda works as a writing tutor at the Novelry and is currently working on her third novel. So that brings me on to just having a big welcome to Mahsuda. How are you this morning?
Yeah, I'm really good. It's really nice to be here. I was born in, Luton. I was going to say Luton, Bedfordshire Hospital, and lived here since till I was 6, and moved to Leicester. And I've been back a couple of times when I was a teenager to visit relatives, but I haven't been for years. So it's been nice to come back, have a little explore, see all the lovely murals everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, as an honorary Lutonian, so I didn't grow up here, but I've been here a good 18 years. It's always nice, I think, to have people come back to the town and just experience it, I think, especially because obviously it has undergone some, quite a bit of change. And now the Hat District, which is obviously a part of where we are at the moment, like you said, I think the first thing you noticed was the murals. And I think it's really lovely to kind of see that kind of celebration, I think, of different kind of, arts and culture. And I know we can define that in really different ways. So coming on to yourself and your journey, in that introduction, we mentioned that you're a recipient of the S.I. Leeds Literary Prize and the Bristol Short Story Prize. That was in 2014. So what impact did that have on your writing journey, and how has it been for you since then?
So I'm one of those annoying people that I've always known I wanted to be a writer, probably since about the age of 8, when I realised you could be a writer and that could be a job, an actual job. So I had it in my mind I was going to do it. I grew up on a council estate in Leicester, and I didn't really think about there being any barriers, as a kid, I think you do just think, well, I can do that, people can do that, why can't I do it? And then obviously, as a South Asian woman from a single-parent family as well, started to see how maybe my story isn't as well as reflected in, especially in the 90s where I was growing up, on the bookshelves, and that might be a bit more difficult for me. But I carried on writing because that's just what I wanted to do, and it's what I needed to do. But it was a bit of a long journey, really. So I originally wrote the first draft of The Things We Thought We Knew when I was 16. And I always say that doesn't mean it was good. It was just in a notebook that my sister had given me. It was a big notebook. I wrote it all in one go. I didn't really edit it or kind of even really think about structuring it properly. But when I did come back to it, which was after I'd had a couple of failed attempts at trying to write books, I really still loved the characters, and I loved the setting. I knew the setting. It was council estate in Leicester. And so I thought I'd have another go at it. And that's when I basically rewrote the book from scratch, had a proper structure this time, and started entering it into competitions. So I had been sending it out to agents, but the interesting thing about agents and sending it to publishers is that you just don't hear anything. So you kind of feel like you're throwing your manuscript into a void, and you don't really know why it's being rejected or why it's not quite hitting the mark. So I started entering lots of competitions, and then in the same year, so I'd been entering lots of things and sending to agents, I was shortlisted in the Dyslexia novel competition, the Bristol Prize short story competition, and the SI Leeds prize as well, and won the latter two. So that was just huge for me, because it meant, I'm doing the right thing. Because I had got to the point where it was like, am I a ridiculous person to think I could be a published writer, especially with my background? Is it just like a pie in the sky idea? So just to get that validation that people do like the story, that it has got merit, that I can write, it was a huge turning point for me, actually, to take myself seriously as a writer as well, and to say I was a writer. So for years, I think I was like a closet writer. I wouldn't tell anyone that I wrote, mainly because of those judgments that maybe people would have. And I didn't know anybody growing up in my area that was interested in reading, let alone writing books. So, yeah, it was a huge year for me for that reason.
I mean, it's so amazing to hear that you were 16 when that kind of the first draft almost came into existence. So I'm really interested to know what was it at that age that kind of really got you into the interest of writing? Was it like a teacher? Was it something that you'd kind of sensed? Is it something you were always interested in, and were you a reader when you were younger as well?
So for me, my mum, I grew up in Luton, as I've said. I'm going to keep going on about it because I'm here now. And my mum actually left my dad, which was a massive thing for a British Bangladeshi woman to leave her husband in the 80s, and left and moved to Leicester. And we ended up in a council estate, but it was a predominantly white council estate. My mother would not let me out. She wouldn't let any of us out. So we spent a lot of time at home. And for me, I think reading was my escape, and it was my way of seeing the world, because through books I could see all sorts of people in different environments and in places I'd never been. So I loved being read to at school. I remember that when it was swimming and the other class went swimming, we'd sit and the teacher would read to us and read like Roald Dahl and other books like that, and just sitting and listening to these worlds. I loved the escapism of it. So that's where the reading began. And then, like I say, when I found out at 8, and it was just a normal English lesson where they say, here's how you make a book. You get a publisher, you have an illustrator, and you have an author. And I was like, that you can be an author. That's a job. Like, somebody gets paid to do that. And I loved making up stories. So it just, it was just that moment of, this is it. This is what I want to do. Yeah.
And you mentioned, obviously, the fact that the book is also, the fact that a single Bangladeshi mum living with her daughter on a council estate in Leicester. And obviously we don't always get to hear working class stories like that. And we also hear a lot, I guess, in the publishing industry about kind of representation. But do you think people are taking more notice and adapting as they should now to I guess, representation within publishing and books?
I think I've been doing this long enough that I've started to see the patterns of the publishing industry taking note of diversity every few years and then kind of dropping it and then coming back to it. And I'm not saying that it hasn't changed. It's definitely improved. I definitely see a far more bigger variety of names, of people from different backgrounds. Class is a really hard one, I think, because you don't necessarily know someone's class from just like looking at them or talking to them. And those type of things I've found in the publishing industry it's a little bit, it's very easy to go to a big publishing event where there's a lot of money around and lots of drink around and lots of people with certain accents and feel like an imposter because you feel like you don't belong there. And then you start speaking to some of the the people, and they're like, oh no, I came from a really working class background, but they've acquired an accent because they feel they need one to be in publishing. So that's an interesting one, being working class. But I do think that there is change, but I also think that I've seen it happen before, and it being dropped, and writers being dropped. And what I really think needs to happen is that the publishing industry needs to learn how to really market people from different backgrounds in a way that means that we do have the same level playing field as people who have just got more kind of privilege in that area because they're not questioned. For example, just having people of colour, writers of colour, writing in different genres and not just a stereotypical book. I was really afraid, like with this novel, that they would put sari print all over it, and even though it's not relevant, and they would, because that's what I saw. That's the only other books I saw by South Asian writers had sari print on it and references to samosas and chapatis. So I was really hoping that wouldn't happen, and it didn't happen. So I feel like there are little subtle changes, but I do think there's probably a big way to go, really.
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as you started describing that, I'm thinking that's exactly obviously what, I guess even me, like growing up, that's what you would see when there was something, oh, this is by a South Asian writer, or something that might seem relevant. But you're right, it'd be kind of plastered with certain images, isn't it, that maybe stereotypically, yeah, people would associate. And I guess it pigeonholes South Asian writers, obviously, because that's the context we're speaking in. And I guess what's really interesting is kind of a little bit, related to that. The things we thought we knew. You talk about, obviously, Raveen, who's the main protagonist, and her relationship, obviously, with her mother, but also this kind of fraught, I guess, feelings that she has towards her mother tongue. And I think you captured that really beautifully. It was, you wrote really delicately about it. Why was it important for you to kind of also include that within the story?
Mainly because, and this is probably the case with everything I include in my novels, is because it's what happened to me. So I moved from Luton, very white council estate, nobody spoke hardly. It's really interesting because I'm in Leicester, which is such a diverse city, and the next neighbourhood is Rushmead, which is a massively diverse South Asian community there. But because I was brought up on this council estate that didn't have that, I was ashamed of having like a different language. We didn't speak it outside of the house because, well, we would probably get quite mercilessly teased and worse. So we kind of covered that up. So I stopped speaking Bengali I would speak English to my mum and she would speak Bengali back, which is very frustrating to me now because I understand it and now I can't speak it fluently. And if I ever work with children and they are multilingual, I will very empathetically say, please carry on speaking both your languages. It's so useful. It's so helpful in the future. It's just a great skill, and I just didn't appreciate it back then. So yeah, that's reflected in the book. Is that so Raveen's mum, who's called Amma, which is how you would say mum in Bengali, she sings to her the Bangladeshi national anthem. She sings her folk tales and speaks to her constantly in the hope that she will pick up Bengali, but Raveen flatly refuses to respond in that way, and then therefore loses some of the language because of that.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because obviously I'm from Pakistani background, so I grew up speaking Urdu, and I know actually I'm now struggling as much. I really want to pass it on to my children, but yeah, absolutely, there's kind of a disconnect, and but at the same time, knowing it's almost a key, isn't it, a connection to heritage, and. But I think what the great thing is nowadays schools and teachers, and there is a push that actually being bilingual, multilingual is a skill, like you said. So it's definitely worth celebrating. And both in the things that we know, and the things we thought we knew, and How to Find Home, which is your recent book. Obviously, you're tackling quite important issues. This one specifically, kind of looking at a young person living with chronic illness. You then in How to Find Home is looking at obviously the kind of issue of homelessness. So to what extent do you think writers maybe have a responsibility to I mean, do they? Maybe they don't, to inform readers of social issues. So we can kind of challenge that status quo and prejudice we might have about certain things.
Personally, I think the only responsibility of a writer really is to entertain the reader. That's your primary objective. It happens to be that I like to tackle, or I like to explore the voices of people we don't normally hear from, because I didn't see that on the shelf growing up, and because those are the lives I'm really interested in. So I don't go in thinking, I definitely don't go in thinking, let's teach people about something, because that will never work. Nobody will read it. Nobody likes being told what to think. But I do like to get under the skin of somebody you might meet, but you might never really talk to. And especially Ravine, she's confined to her room, so she doesn't even really leave. And experience what that experience might be via story, which was what I love story for. We can go and just see what it's like to be someone else for a bit. And that's kind of why I was really interested in writing about homelessness in my second novel, because we pass people who are homeless all the time. My mum, she had hardly any money, would always encourage me. She would always stick 10p in my hand and get me to go and give money to the poor. And that really made me think, well, why she was so frugal with everything. Why is this different? And what's happening with this person that's on the street and asking for money? So I'm always interested in the stories that maybe I'm curious about, which happens to be the people we don't really hear a lot from. But I do, if that comes up in your writing, I think don't shy away from it, because if it's something you want to really write about, but also I really don't want to put pressure on writers to say you have to educate and talk about social issues if it's not something that's natural to what you're writing. It's hard enough writing, let alone trying to insert messages.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with the things that we thought we knew, obviously, like we mentioned, there's the topic of kind of health issues related to chronic pain, and that's something which at the moment is still not really acknowledged. So, I mean, I have people, or I know people that, are suffering from that kind of pain, and when they go to the doctor or GP or just talking to even family and friends, they feel that they're not being heard or seen. So I can imagine, that this because maybe really helped. But did you have to then do a lot of research, in order to really, I guess, capture that?
Yes, 100%. So both with chronic pain in this book and with homelessness in the second book, it was really important to me, if I'm going to write about people who aren't talked about or represented in literature, that I've got to do my research. So I know a few people who suffer with various different conditions that makes leaving the house very difficult. I also had a condition, well, not chronic pain specifically, but where I was... And I only realised this after I'd written the book, when somebody asked me at a festival, where I was kind of... I had a condition where I couldn't eat, so I lost a lot of weight and was in my mum's kind of council house, and I couldn't really leave apart from when I had to, and I was quite weak. So I was in a similar position to what Ravine was in as well. So, so it was really important to me that I do the research for those things. And also, the most important thing for me is to not reinforce stereotypes. And it was lovely when the book was released. I didn't write the book with the aim of like trying to say something big or huge. It was just what my character goes through. But to have people who have had chronic pain or chronic conditions kind of review and say, this is the first time I've ever seen myself represented, it was just very touching. It's an added bonus, really, that you get to explore a life that people can see themselves in.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And, the fact that, speaking about, I guess, Ravine as a character, but I guess the fact that you're saying you also have that kind of, maybe a similar experience, it really made me think while I was reading, the book, and the fact that Ravine, there's a really visceral feeling of kind of loneliness and isolation that she finds herself, even though she is surrounded by people. Obviously she's got her mum looking after her, but it really made me think of the fact that obviously so many all of us, we the unprecedented time of COVID and being in lockdown, and the sense of isolation we all felt, I guess, for so long. And then obviously even now, there's people who suffer from like long COVID and, really struggling with the impact of that time. How do you think that something like reading and writing can maybe help those of us who might still be processing all of that? Because I almost feel like we had this major global event and then we almost had to carry on as normal, just go back to work. And, even though actually it just really impacted everyone, both at a really micro level, but also a macro level. But yeah, so how do you think reading and writing might be able to, help us process that still?
Well, one of the reasons Ravine in the book starts writing at all is because her mother's been told that it'd be good for her to have a pain diary to kind of write everything down. And my husband's a physiotherapist, so I was able to look into that as well. And he said that is something that's sometimes recommended for people. And that really opens up a world that she has been trying to ignore for many years, because suddenly she's acknowledging what's happening to her and what's happened to her. So I think writing is definitely a great portal of doing that, because you can have a little bit of distance from being right back in that memory by writing. And also, it's like surprising things come out when you start putting pen to page, things you might not have remembered, or even thoughts that you didn't realise you had about a situation. And yeah, COVID is such a strange period now, isn't it, to think back on it. I remember somebody talking about how we had all that toilet paper shortage, and I'd completely forgotten about the panic, people panic buying toilet paper, and how that was such a huge thing. We can forget all of those things, and it's interesting if you just put pen to paper what comes back, I think. And I think I know I've used writing to help me get through problems. If I'm really stuck with something, I'll just start writing and see if a solution comes up, and often it does. And I think not putting pressure on yourself to write really helps with that. If you just allow what comes to come, it can be quite cathartic. Yeah.
And just on that point, what is your creative process like? Because I know different writers approach their writing in different ways.
So it depends on what I'm working on. So I write novels, but I also, in between drafts, so I think it's really good after you've done a draft is to have a good break, because you're so in it. It's hard to see the wood for the trees. I'll write a short story, or I'll work on something completely different. But I guess it's just, I have a lot of checklists, a lot of tick lists, and the first draft for me is just really important. I just get through it not as quickly as I can, but without editing, because that is the thing that I think kills a lot of writing for a lot of writers. They start things they never finish because they want it to be perfect the first time round. It's never going to be perfect. Definitely not the first time round. So just having that ability of and I think you get this after you've written a novel or two, of knowing that you can go back and you can make it better. And yes, it's messy, and it's really horrible when it's messy, because we're all a bit of perfectionists as writers. But trying to get through that first draft is so important, because once after that, I now really enjoy the editing process, because that's just moulding it and making it sound how you want it to sound. But the hardest bit, honestly, is writing that first draft.
And if there's anyone in the audience, like for example, I'm really interested in being able to write stories, if I could, what advice would you give? I guess journaling would be one, maybe just getting used to writing on page, but what other advice might you be able to share?
I think in terms of ideas, if you've got a few ideas for a novel or a short story or a screenplay, whatever it might be, I always have a notebook for every idea. Because the thing is, when you start writing something, all the other ideas pop up. And they're like, I don't have any problems, and I'm sparkly and new. come to me. Yeah. So what I do is I address that by writing in the notebook and putting down any other extra ideas, but I stay dedicated to the current project, because otherwise it won't get done. So I'd put all your ideas down, see what really excites you. So which idea in particular keeps calling out to you, because that's the one, because it is a long slog writing a novel, so you've got to be excited about it. And if you lose your excitement, if you can try and find your excitement for it again and remember why you wanted to write that story in the first place. I think that's really invaluable. And also think about your influences and what you really love reading, so that you know why you're doing it as well.
Yeah. And on that point, I mean, so when you were younger, who was your inspiration, I guess? Who did you look up to? And even now, are there particular writers that you look out for that you enjoy reading as well?
I always find this difficult because I just read anything, like literally anything in the library that I could get my hands on, I read. So there wasn't a particular author. There's never been particular authors. I loved fairy tales growing up, and I loved just escaping into different books. But I think, let me think. See, and now all names of writers slip my mind. No, but I think I really loved Life of Pi. I really loved The Colour Purple. You know, different books for different reasons. So for what else has really influenced me? I remember I used to say Midnight's Children. It used to be a massive influence for me, and I tried rereading it recently and I could not get into it. So I do think you have different books for different parts of your life. So a variety of influences from all over, really. But it's just reading. I just love reading. Yeah.
And I think that's so important, isn't it? Because the fact that you maybe different stages of your life read different type of books, and I mean, like I mentioned in my introduction, obviously I run a book club in Luton, and I think one of the best things is that it keeps the motivation going, I guess, for reading, because obviously you're part of this group, but also you end up reading books maybe you wouldn't normally read, and I think that is such an amazing way to open up your world, isn't it? Because you really are then traveling to maybe a different time or a different country or, you know, different land, whatever, and it really is opening up, you know, horizons. I mean, my next question was going to be coming back, obviously, to the things we thought we knew. It is pretty much a coming-of-age story, obviously about Ravine, about her experience. But what I was interested in knowing is there anything that you discovered about your own self while writing that book?
Ooh. I think inevitably you do, as a writer, learn something new with each book. The reason I chose to write about a British Bangladeshi girl growing up on a council estate in Leicester was because I knew that. I knew what that was. But at the same time, I didn't. So it's a completely different character from myself. She had a different condition from what I had. Her mother's, I mean, a lot of people love the mother character in this and ask me if it's based on my mum. It really isn't. So it's like the complete opposite experience. She's very doting, this mother, very patient, incredibly patient with Ravine. And so I think, what did I learn? I think with any first book, you learn how to write a book, which is so vitally important. But also, I do like the emotional journey, and she definitely goes, this is a coming-of-age book, so she definitely goes on a journey from being very resistant to engaging with the world to knowing what she wants, that she wants to engage more with the world. And I was incredibly shy as a child, so I think I've had to kind of go on that journey, as you can tell, because I have to now sit in front of people and talk. But with books, I'm happy to sit in front of people and talk. It's a really strange paradox. But so I guess I kind of went a little bit on the same journey as her of having to, being kind of isolated to which I was growing up, to knowing where she wants to be in the world.
Yeah, no, you could definitely sense kind of your emotional connection, obviously, to something that you've written. And I wonder whether this might be a good time to invite you to maybe do a short reading of the book. Might be quite nice.
Yeah, I'm going to try and navigate holding a mic while reading. So this is just from the opening of The Things We Thought We Knew, which is set in two different times, actually. So the first bit is set in 1999. A constellation is born. You came for me at midnight, a squishy hand tugging mine, yanking me awake. I rubbed my eyelids, asked what the heck was going on. I needed sleep. I was a growing girl. You giggled through gap teeth, passing me my robe before continuing to tug-tug as we crept from the cave of my room, past the rumbling snores of Amma's lair, down the stairs and out of the flat. Your brother was standing outside in lightning bolt pyjamas. The scruffy strands of his hair matched the zigzag pattern. He looked sleepy and cross at the same time. "Marianne," I said, trying to sound stern as my body yawned. You pressed a finger to your lips, then turned away, guiding us through the night. Our feet stumbled against concrete steps, hands stretched up to metal railings that made me shiver. On the 4th floor, you signalled for us to sit in our usual places. Our legs dangled through the balcony railings as you slid your body between us and linked your arms through ours. Curls of your hair brushed against my cheek. You pointed to the sky. "Look," you said. I looked. I saw 1 billion stars against an indigo sky. The brightness of them, the sheer number of them. "That," you said, pointing straight up, "is the constellation of cartwheels." Your head fell back, a crescent grin across your face. I sneaked my hand into the pocket of my robe and felt the edges of the book inside. "That," I said, pointing to a wispy cluster is the constellation of mini dictionaries. I looked over at Jonathan, waiting for him to object. "No," he said, shaking his head, his glasses wobbling on the bridge of his nose. "That is the constellation of thunderstorms." You looked at me and I at you. We were fizzing with surprise. Our fingers rose, arms outstretched. "The constellation of lemon sherbets," you said. "The constellation of hurricanes," your brother said. "The constellation of vegetable dansak," I said. We continued naming the constellations all through the night until we weren't even using words, but a jumble of made-up sounds. I felt your body next to mine, warming me like a blanket. When I looked at the horizon, I saw a shooting star. It skimmed across the velvet night in a streaking blaze. Or maybe I didn't see that. Maybe that's just what I wanted to see. The constellation of bed, 2010. I wake up to find my room has been entered ninja style during the night. Streamers line the ceiling. Balloons are taped to the corners in clusters, and a giant holographic banner dangles crookedly on the wall. Below it, a dozen photographs are tacked in a row. It's like a museum timeline done on the cheap. Photo 1, 1992, birth of Ravine, shriveled newborn with too much hair. Photo 3, 1996, nativity play, girl dressed as sheep, straw hanging from mouth. Photo 8, 2000, New Year's Eve, teenager lying in bed, party hat perched jauntily on head. If there were an award for the world's worst listener, my mother would win hands down. Give her the simplest sentence and watch the cogs of her brain pull in the words, twist them up and spit out a new meaning. You say you want a kitten. She buys you a coat. You say you don't like cabbage. She cooks 7 different cabbage recipes. You say you don't want a party and you wake up to a sight that makes you sweat so heavily your pyjamas stick to your skin and you have to check your knickers to make sure you haven't wet them. I rub my eyes as the smell of onion bhajis floats up from the kitchen. It's mixed with the heavy scent of Citrus Breeze air freshener. I hope this is a nightmare. As I prop myself up, the twisting muscles along my arm confirm the truth. This is real. "You are up," Amma says, wobbling through the door with a cake the size of a coffee table in her arms. She's wearing an orange sari pleated perfectly down the middle, a gallon of coconut oil combed through her hair. Leaning to the side, she kicks the stereo with her heel to play. Synthesized drums erupt into the room. She starts grinning at me as though this is the finale of a great show, and it's time for me to applaud. I place my pillow upright behind me and sink back. "Amma," I say. She shakes her head, eyes fogging over as she cocks her ear to the music. I watch her nod in time to the beat. The song continues to play. The cake begins to slide. "Amma," I say. Wait," she says, straightening the platter. Cymbals crash over drums as Stevie Wonder hits the chorus of Happy Birthday. I wait until it finishes, then watch Amma wiggle over to me before placing the chocolate gravestone across my lap. "It took 3 days to make," she says. Covered in brown frosting and a series of plastic roses, the cake has a collection of half-used candles plotted around its perimeter. In the middle, iced in pink loopy writing, are the words, "Happy 18th birthday, Ravine Roy." The letters shrink as they reach my name, but somehow Amma has still managed to ice a smiley face after the exclamation marks. My spine rolls forward like a sapling snapped in the wind. Amma interprets this as a sign of awe. "It is not a problem," she says, waving a hand in the air. "Anything for my darling Ravine." I made it clear last week. No balloons, no cake, no party. But somehow Amma's brain has churned my words into all the balloons she can blow up, the biggest cake she can bake, and as many party items as she can fill the room with. Amma begins lighting the candles. Because there are so many, this takes a good 2 minutes. By the time she's on the 4th match, my face is clammy. The throbbing in my limbs is making my vision woozy. I suck in a huge breath, ready to blow the whole monstrosity to another building. But as soon as the last candle is lit, Amma begins slapping her thigh, singing happy birthday to me in Bengali. Amma's been singing Bengali to me since I was in the womb, trying to trick me into learning the language. When I was a toddler, she translated every nursery rhyme and changed all the animals, but Baba Kalashagol doesn't quite ring the same. At bedtime, she sang me folk songs about boats and paddy fields until I couldn't get to sleep without them. I rebelled against her sing-song brainwashing by blocking out the meaning of all Bengali words. I can now chant the entire national anthem of Bangladesh without any idea of what I'm singing. The only Bengali I actually use is Amma, meaning mother. With my cheeks puffed out and afraid that either I'll pass out or Amma's sari will catch fire, I blow out the candles. She stops mid-verse and looks down at the cake. "Of course you made a wish," she asks. Spirals of smoke circle my body. I close my eyes and clear my throat. I wish for no more celebrations. I look up eagerly. Amma frowns, shaking her head as she pulls out a pillbox from the waist of her sari petticoat and places it on the bedside table. "If you say it out loud, it will not come true," she says. "Everybody knows this, Ravine." And of course, she is right.
That's so beautiful to actually hear you read it, because I'm thinking, obviously, as a reader, to get that sense of the author voice, I think is so lovely. And again, there's so much as you're reading, I'm thinking, I know that. I can really relate to the citrus orangey kind of scent mixed with onion bhajis and whatnot. And, it's just... you capture so much. And I guess one of my questions is, I think it's both the first 2 chapters, you refer to constellations. What was the reason, I guess, behind that? I mean, I'm just thinking when I was younger, I wanted to be an astronaut. I used to love everything about space. There was a specific reason, I think, for picking those chapter titles?
I think it comes from the opening where they're looking up at the sky. Mm-hmm. And I think when your life can be quite small, living on a council estate, especially my version of it, which was not to be allowed out very often. Like those things, like the sky, everybody has access to that. And the things as a child that you kind of make up. Like there's constellations up there. Let's give them some random names. And how they're all little stories, I guess, in themselves, little. And each chapter is the constellation of something, because it's a little story of its own.
No, I think that does capture each part of the story really well as well. And I think that's just a lovely way, I think, to imagine things. And again, while I'm listening to you read, I was just thinking that something I read recently came up on. I think I was scrolling through social media, and it was an article in I think it was the Guardian maybe, and they were just reporting on the National Literacy Trust, which have recently found that 35% of 18 to 18-year-olds enjoy. Only 35% enjoy reading in their own time. And so this article, the headline was "Shocking and Dispiriting Fall in Children Reading for Pleasure." And I guess what I wanted to ask you is, what do you think might help young people to fall in love with reading again? Or not even just young people. I think we live such busy lives, and I hear lots of people say, "Oh, but I don't have time to read," or it's just they struggle. What can make us fall in love with reading again, do you think?
Yeah, I think this crisis of children reading, it often comes up every few years, and I'm sure I've seen statistics before where children are reading more than they've ever read before. So I think it really depends on the child and what they're into, and really encouraging them to be into whatever they're into. So not feeling like they have to all read Shakespeare and Charles Dickens if it's not for them. To go into a library, which libraries are so full of different types of books. There's graphic novels, there's like, my child is 8 years old and she still loves her picture books. She still loves, she won't let me give them away. And that's fine because she just loves reading them. So if it's like not being too judgmental about what that is. I think there's a lot of pressure in schools to read for academic reasons rather than fun. So reading for fun, I think, is key. And having a lot of books around really helps with that. So going to the library, getting as many as you can out. And although my 8-year-old will say that she's overwhelmed by the amount of books she's got, so she can only do one at a time. Which is the same for me. I've got about 10 books I try and read at the same time, and I do it to myself. But also, so finding a nice time. It's also a great time to not be looking at your phone, to just, I'm going to give myself 20 minutes a day. If you give yourself 20 minutes a day, you can get through a book relatively quickly. And I'm dyslexic, so it takes me a long time to read through a book. But if I do that, because my concentration can be quite short because of dyslexia, I can get through a book. I'm part of a book club as well, which really helps because it makes me read the book. So things like that, I think.
Because really I think it's true. I mean, you mentioned with schools, I think sometimes it can come across quite prescriptive, maybe, you know, for young people, of course, because it's a set text and you've got to get through, you know, an exam. But I think, what you're saying, I love what you're saying about just being surrounded by books. And I mean, my to-be-read pile is definitely getting much bigger. But, you know, isn't there a term that they've said that there's one thing about reading books, but apparently you can get joy of just buying books and keeping them. I'm sure they invented a word for it. I can't remember what it is, but I thought, and I went to my husband, I said, you see? This is why I buy books. It's not, you know, I don't always have to read them. But anyway, I definitely need more book shelf space.
I'm definitely that word too.
So I will look that up. I will look that up and find out what it is. But and I guess it'd be really nice to know. So I think just before we kind of open up to the audience for Q&A, do you have? Is this something you're working on at the moment? Is this something we've got? You know, we can look forward to. It might be quite nice. And obviously, you don't have to give away too much information, but.
So I've just finished a novel, actually, which is now out on submission, which means it's being sent out to publishers and agents. I mean, editors even. I've got an agent, so that's always a terrifying time. And that book is about a British Punjabi family growing up in a village in Derbyshire, and lots of other things. The son starts to have hallucinations, and the mother thinks it's from God. The dad thinks it's scientific, and all of this. But I really did want to, because both my other books are quite urban, explore that experience of being a family, the only family of colour in a village, which I think is quite a unique experience. As well as family dynamics, which is what everybody deals with, awkward family dynamics. So that's that book. And so now I'm thinking about the next one. So lots going on.
Oh, fantastic. No, that's so great to hear. So I think this might be a good time to kind of open up to any questions that the audience might have. We do have a mic, so because obviously this event is also being live streamed, it would just be helpful for everybody online to be able to hear. So if you'd like to put your hands up and
Hi, absolutely loved what you said, and Baba Kali.
Kalashakal.
I love that. How many years was it before you went back to this original script? Your original book.
So wrote it when I was 16, like I said, very quickly. And then had a couple of goes at trying to write novels when I was at university, which was not a good idea. And I did English Lit and Education, and the English Lit actually killed writing for me because it was the over-examining of every single line of, is this feminist, is this postmodern? And I couldn't write. And so I rewrote this is what I was talking about, getting through a first draft. I rewrote the opening of a novel 1 million times over, and then it became so tight I couldn't get out of it. And then I think it was about 30 when I found that notebook again. I always had it, but like properly read it as though it was a novel, and was like, oh, there's my natural voice is in there. I'm not trying to be anybody else, and I still really liked it. And lots wrong with it, absolutely loads. Too many characters, too many storylines, but the heart of it was still something that connected.
Sorry, hi. I was just interested about the professional journey, because you said, you know, it's always reassuring to hear writers also getting ignored by literary agents. You feel like you've thrown your work into like a brick in a lake, it just vanishes. So where was the turning point for you where you got an agent and you started sort of getting responses?
So really it was that year where I started to have little successes. So with the Dyslexia novel competition, I actually got an agent through that because there was an agent on the panel. But then by summer, she'd stopped being an agent. So I got an agent and lost an agent. She went to Foreign Rights. So then I felt very lost. And then I won the Bristol Prize and the SI Leeds Prize. And because I had like a CV, essentially, instead of back in those days, I think we send via post, may even have sent via post rather than email. I was able to directly just email agents, my top 5, I chose 5, and just said, I have had an agent. Unfortunately, she's no longer working as one, but I've got this novel which has had this interest and this interest, you know, so just to big it up a bit. And then all of a sudden I got responses for all of them. So that, I think having little things on your CV that show that you're very dedicated, that people are paying attention, really, really helps.
Does anyone else?
Hi. Just thinking about a gender thing. You mentioned about being a South Asian woman. Do you think a South Asian man would have got through quicker, or would have had an easier journey?
Oh, that's a really tricky one. That's an interesting question, and I really think, and I don't know if this is being too diplomatic, but it depends on the book. And I think, yeah, there's definitely, if you write about certain things, I feel like an Asian writer, a South Asian writer, or male or female, would get published quicker. So I think from male writers who are South Asian, there might be, or even as a black writer, if you're writing more about the gritty urban stuff, I've seen those things get published quite quickly. If you're from South Asia and writing about, you know, like, again, the gritty urban cities, those get published. But see, so my book, which is kind of like, it's not gritty. It's set in a council estate, but it's not saying it's all about drugs and gangs and all of the stereotypical things that I think people assume about inner city council estates. And I think maybe sometimes the stereotypes get, because I don't know why, I think readers can cope with more subtle stories. But if you are willing to kind of, or if that's just a story you want to tell, fair enough. But I've seen those stories maybe get more preference. I don't know about whether being a man, and because racism's so huge. So whether there would be a slight edge, I guess if you're a certain type of male author, that's all I'll say.
That was very diplomatic. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Yeah, of course.
My other question was, you said you went back or you do the first draft. Just wondered, how long does that take for a novel to write a first draft?
Ooh, that's a how long is a piece of string type answer, I'm afraid. So it's different for each book. The first one, obviously, I had a big gap and I rewrote it completely. But I almost don't really want to say, because I know, because I numbered every single draft. And before it got to the point of getting an agent and therefore having more drafts, and then getting an editor and therefore having more drafts, I'd got up to 14. But I don't want people to think that it's different for every writer, and also it's how you decide what's first, like what's a first draft, and a first draft could be very quick and like not have all the detail in it, and then the later drafts, and that could take ages, and then the later drafts is just you revising through it and just checking for that it's consistent and everything's working as it should. But the first draft, for me, it can take me a long time because I have to really. It's about learning the story for myself, so it could take a year or maybe longer. But I know that the pressure is to write a lot quicker than that. I know some writers who, if you're writing crime, write 2 books a year, and I have no idea how they do it. So it depends, I think, on the book, on the type of writer, but it takes me a while.
Hi, do you ever get writer's block? And if so, what do you do about it? Do you go carry on, say, researching that same book, or do something completely different and come back to it?
This is where having all the notebooks is really useful. So if I'm getting stuck on a particular idea, I can go back and look at what, again, excited me about it to begin with, and I try and reignite that, or try and think about how can I make it fun for myself. If I ever get stuck, I wouldn't call it writer's block, but if I ever get stuck, I think I'm obviously not enjoying it. What can I do to the plot, to the characters, so that I'm excited about it again? As a writing coach, what I really don't advise people to do is to start writing a new idea completely, because then you never finish. Because, like I say, those ideas are all sparkly and don't have problems yet. So, but they will have as soon as you start delving into it, and then you'll have another half-finished manuscript. So, apart from when I have breaks, and that's when I'll write a short story, and that's why I do a short story, because then I'm not getting fully into another novel. I try and be loyal to that project.
Holiday from it all, like ordinary workers do.
What, do I have a holiday? I don't think you can, in a way, because your brain is always thinking about it. So even if I go on holiday and something happens, I'll be like, that'd be good for the book. And then I'll have to write it down somewhere. So even if I'm physically like having a holiday, my brain will still be, which is where half the work happens, to be fair. When you're walking around, when you're not supposed to be working on the book, that's when the ideas come.
Just on that point, so do you have an actual notebook and pen that you always carry, or is it on your phone? Like, how do you do that, like when you're out and about?
I'm very analog.
Okay.
I have all notebooks. My kids always know. My kid always knows I've got a pen and a notebook, so she's always like, I know you've got one. Can you get one out? I'm going to write this down. So I always have a notebook. And also, then I also like just tell myself mental notes to write this down when I get home.
Do you use a pen or a pencil?
I use a pen. I know that I don't do as what some writers do, which they write longhand for the whole first draft. I do write on a word processor because I don't have the patience to type it up again. But I know that a lot of people really recommend that method because there is a magic that happens in a scientific thing where you know your brain and your hand connect when you write, and I do that sometimes with notes, but I do use a pen. Do you think pencil's better?
No, well, I use a pencil all the time with a rubber on the end, so it can rub out.
But see, that's really interesting, because it was almost coming back to what Mahsuda was saying about that need to almost edit. And, you know, and I think it's really interesting because when I interviewed you on Inspire FM, and you were talking about that kind of free flow writing, and actually how important it is that we're able to do that. And I can't remember the name of the art. I think it's in The Artist's Way, or where there's an encouragement that you do the morning pages. Is that by Julia Cameron? I think it is from that book. And the fact that if you wake up every morning and you just write, I think she says 3 pages, and you do it every day, the idea is that it just gets you into that flow of almost letting go of your inhibitions, because otherwise we're taught that, no, you don't make mistakes, or focus on your spelling or grammar or all these things. And actually, to go beyond that, I think maybe might really help. I mean, I don't know if you, I guess, agree. I mean, you know, you were saying about free flow writing, and is it something you still do?
It's definitely something I use when I'm stuck with a character. Mm. So I'm quite character driven. I have to really work on plot. But if a character isn't sparking off for me, I will ask them questions and I will free flow write the answers, and it sounds like a bit crazy. Because the other day I was thinking about my new idea, and I put, well, how would you like me to start the novel? Is that what I asked my character? And then she started talking. Yeah. And then I was like, that doesn't feel right. And then I realised I'd asked the question wrong. I should have asked, how do you want to start the novel? And then I got a different answer, which feels like some strange divination. But it's how I get into their heads. And that's exactly what you say, no pressure. I'm not trying to write the first page, which is always the one that we struggle with the most, because that's where we try and grab the reader. I'm just trying to get the voice. I'm just trying to ask some questions.
Yeah, exactly.
And I get some really interesting things that I didn't realise about the character by doing that.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. Are there any other questions? I think we've probably got time for a couple more.
I can just say it.
Okay.
So what things have you learned from being a writer? So self-discovery things.
It's really hard for me to separate, and I know this is probably an issue I need to talk to a therapist about, but separate myself from being a writer, because it's been that so long. I've been writing since I was so little, and it's everything I ever wanted to be, that I do find it difficult to think of myself other than, it's part of who I am. But I know what I'm like if I don't write. So I tried to stop writing when I went to university because I got overwhelmed by all of the kind of over-analysing of everything. And I was like, I need to be a proper person with a proper job. So I stopped writing, and I was miserable. So there was something missing in my life. It's how I express myself. It's how I examine the world through, like I say, with that distance, with that without me all being logic. It's a different part of my mind or my body. So without it, I don't feel like I'm whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about when, like the types of stories you tell, what have you discovered about yourself? For example, if I'm writing, I found that I prefer more positive endings than, say, a negative ending. So from your writing, what have you discovered about yourself in terms of your moral aptitude to write?
I think I'm similar with my endings, I always like there to be hope. I always want there to be a bit of hope at the end of a novel, because I don't want to leave a reader feeling miserable about a world that we could very easily feel miserable about. But it's all about the emotional journey. So I think what I really learn is what it's like to be different people. And I know it sounds strange because I'm the same person, but exploring those different views, because when you're writing a story, it doesn't work if you try and be really didactic and this is the way and this is not the way. You have to explore all points of view to have a convincing story. Yeah, I think, yes, I guess more empathetic. And I think that's what stories are great for. It makes you more empathetic, and it makes you more empathetic as a writer, yeah.
Do you find you can be empathetic with a really nasty character?
I think if you're going to have a really nasty character, it's important to try and be, because otherwise you're going to have a very 2D flat villain, which is actually is off-putting as a reader to get that, because it doesn't feel real. So even if you've got someone that might be doing really horrible things, I think it's important to show that everybody has a weakness. Everybody thinks. I remember seeing an FBI agent talking about this. She was saying how everybody, whether you're a terrorist, whether you're working in the police, whatever it is, everybody thinks they're they're in the right. Everybody thinks they're the good guy. Everybody thinks they're doing the thing that they need to do for whatever reason. So I think, getting under that, why do they think that they're doing the right thing, and not it just being a black and white, they're just evil, which I don't think works, because it's not how life works. It's important to get under that. I don't think I have any characters in my books, now I'm talking about it, who you would say is an out-and-out villain, because I don't think I really believe anybody is an out-and-out villain. So, yeah. Really getting me to think here.
No, those are great questions. Thank you so much. And I guess on the point that you just said about you like your endings to have that sense of hope, even though you're tackling really maybe difficult conversations and themes, and especially obviously with the current world we're living in, everything that's going on socio-politically. What would be maybe your last word or a few words, I guess, of hope for maybe the audience and for yourself? Might be a really nice way to kind of close the session.
Ooh.
I know it's a big one. Sorry.
Give everyone hope. What I'm learning, and I don't know if this is coming with age, is that instead of believing all of the stories or buying in, spending a lot of my mental space on all of the stories that the media says that I should be looking at, is to look at my actual world around me and the people who I interact with, who I don't get. I get generally nice interactions with in my local community and events like this. And it doesn't, when I'm in an event like this, it doesn't feel like the world is burning. If I look at the media, it does feel like the world is burning. So I think actually looking at your own life and what's happening in front of you, and also escaping into books, and to get those different perspectives, to see that not everybody thinks the same. I think that can make a big difference.
I know, absolutely. And just on a very last note, if people are interested, obviously, you said obviously you're writing your next book and want to follow your work and keep up with all the things that you're doing, how can they follow you? What's the best platform?
So that's a good question as well, because I stopped going on whatever it's called now. Is it X now? Because of that, because it really wasn't helping me engage with the world in a positive way. I am on Instagram. I like a good picture, and I will definitely be putting up a couple of pictures of Luton later. And my website, which is www.mahsudasnaith.com. Fantastic,
thank you. So thank you to Mahsuda for everything that you've spoken about today, sharing your journey with us, and obviously your beautiful writing as well. And thank you, obviously, to the audience for taking the time to come today and for all the amazing questions. So the next, if anyone is interested, and I hope you are able to take some time out today for the rest of the book festival today. I'm going to be speaking with Jasmine Elmer, and that's going to be at 11:45. Her book is Goddess with 1,000 Faces. So it's very much rooted, she's, I think, the description is obviously an expert in terms of ancient goddesses, and so it's really a fantastic event. So that's the next one that is on in the same place here. So I hope you're able to join us there. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. So thank you so much.
I think